You okay?
Oh, yeah, fine.
Okay.
I didn't hear anything.
Oh, that's not right.
You what? Oh.
I'm letting them know I'm just getting this.
Okay,
That was jet lag for me for like. a week. I was
that's
like,
not good.
like this. That is like, I'm
I
reviewing
did
it.
not
right now.
know, I
I agree with that.
yes, but. Don't know. Francesca,
Sure.
do you know if we have an RSVP from either Agnes or David?
Let me double check.
David wasn't there today, was it?
No, he told me he wasn't coming today, but I think he had indicated he would be here. But you know, my recollection, that's really first something in that area.
Did, it end on time, everything?
Ended a little early, yeah,
He's, here,
and there he is.
I don't
Oh,
know,
David.
Agnes is, Francesca, just, Agnes, I guess. He's here.
Oh. So it doesn't look like that for her to come out.
Okay.
Well, I
Well-
spoke with her yesterday and it seemed like she would be here.
Yeah, well, Agnes did come up to me yesterday and warn me about something that she was thinking might be broached at the meeting. I was like, assumed she was gonna be there to broach that topic, but we'll see. No, I know, we've got 3 minutes yet.
We missed you today.
I'm sure you did fine without me though.
Well, they considered shutting it down, you weren't there.
Yeah. Was it a good session? Yeah, it was okay.
And I think that somebody had to go to the night group said. The whole point of this, there's no way to solve the triangle solution, but it does get. Perhaps people that are not of the same mind working together.
Done? Okay, all right.
Now we can. Oh. You still have 1 minute.
Or you said you're like, is he trying to tell me right now? Reading that report right now. Don't send emails.
Well, you're saying it's for the next day, I just need to send you a text every hour. You can do it. Here, we'll get through it. Fine.
That's freaking cold.
Be cold. I don't get cold easily, but. Yeah, particularly,
Yeah, or you're going out.
I know I am, but it's just been particularly cold.
I think you need to check that.
well, just in general, I would say from an exterior weather perspective, it's been the coldest winter that I can remember in a very long time. That's freezing, very cold winter. Which, of course, the suspicious part of me makes me think that it's now we're building all this energy up, mental energy saying it needs to be warmer, so we're probably gonna have a freakishly hot summer.
That's usually what happens. If we're cold, it's too dry.
We'll see.
We do have quorum, so we can start whenever you'd like.
Thanks, I'm only going a minute left, so.
Computers.
That. See, that was the name, what? Well, actually, technically, I don't think that nice lady over let me start early. It's very. Yes. Anyway. Okay, we are now at 1:30, so I will go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Sandag Audit Committee, Friday, March 10th, 2023, and are we streaming, have audio, so we have a translator. So before we go any further, I'd like to ask our interpreter, I believe Grisel Diafana, to introduce herself and walk through how to access our interpretation services.
Hi, hello, good afternoon, everybody. I will repeat the following message in English. Este es un aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor, vaya a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, haga clic en el icono de interpretación, un globo terráqueo, y seleccione español o Spanish. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil, presione los puntos suspensivos y luego Interpretation y después el idioma. Si se ha unido a la reunión en la sala de juntas de Sandag y necesita interpretación, por favor diríjase a la recepción del piso 7 y solicite un receptor. Parece un pequeño iPod y se puede escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y comenzará automáticamente. To use the Zoom interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen and click on the interpretation icon that appears as a world. Select either English or Spanish. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app, please press the ellipsis and then interpretation and then choose your language. If you're joining us today at Sandag and need interpretation, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. It looks like an iPod and comes with an earpiece which you can use to hear the meeting in Spanish. Simply hold the earpiece to your ear and the interpretation will come through automatically. Thank you.
Thank you. And listen, do we need to do a roll call or can I just acknowledge that everybody is present?
It's entirely up to you.
Okay, I will just acknowledge that all members are currently present, and would you then please join me in the pledge? Ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Before we get into the agenda, I thought we have a new member that we might introduce our new vice chair and then go around and at least look at other members, introduce ourselves to him as well. So would you like to start, David? Very good. Thank you very much, David. Neighbor. Yes.
David Drucker. I am on City Council in Del Mar. I was first elected in 1996. I served till 2008. During that time, I did sit on the Transportation Committee for Sandag for a couple of years. I was the board chair of NCPD for a year. And then I was reelected in 2016 and served on the Del Mar City Council in 2016. And then the alternate rep Sandag for the last 2 years, or last 4 years. And I've also served on the regional planning committee. And, I'm really excited to do the job.
Well, thank you, David.
Yeah.
So why don't we do our own intro? Ed, would you like to start?
I dare hard.
That works.
I guess the other thing is Ed and I serve on the Clean Energy Alliance for North County. I'm the chair of that also.
Bob Monson, retired. I spent 27 years with the Port of San Diego. The last 6-7 years, I was their executive and chief audit executive.
Okay, Agnes Nickerson, I'm a public member of the audit committee. I think this is my second year on this committee now. And my background is in finance and accounting. My regular daytime job, I'm the CFO and vice president at San Diego State University.
Stuart Halpern, a retired financial executive, and along with Bob was a charter member, public member of this.
I'm not a member. My name is Amberlynn Hughes. I am the Deputy General Counsel and I provide legal support to the audit committee.
David Zito. You can know each other. Yeah, I've been chair for the past couple of years and I've been fortunate enough to be reappointed for another 2-year term. You know, so that.
Hi, Dave, I'm Ray Major.
You know, Ray and I have worked together, known each other for about 25 years.
At least, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Dave. I'm Mary Coach Mushrab. I'm the independent performance auditor, at least until the end of June.
Hi, Doug Pete, I'm the principal management. Mike Ryan, one of the associate management internal auditors.
Crystal Townsend, associate management internal auditor.
Chris Legato, associate management internal auditor.
I'm Francesca Webb. I'm the deputy clerk of the board.
That's good. And we are missing Lloyd. We'll get to meet next time. Anyways, hopefully a well-deserved vacation.
Yeah.
So thanks for that and welcome aboard. Looking forward to a good year. So with that, we will go on and head into the regular agenda, and we'll start with public comments and communications. I decided to shift things up a little bit. The agenda is a little bit different, but I think it'll work out well. I've made it look a little bit more like the board agenda, including moving member comments to the end, because that gives us an opportunity if something comes up during the meeting. If we want to approach it at the end, we can. So anyway, so we'll start with item number 1. Do we have any public member comments or communication?
We do not.
We do not. So we'll move on to item number 2, the agency report. Ready to take it away.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to share that we are extending the Youth Opportunity Pass program. The fiscal 2024 draft budget identifies funding for another year, and we continue to look for additional funding to expand to ages 24 and below. So essentially all young adults could be riding transit for free. The regional plan is the driving force behind much of the work that we do, as you know, and we are taking the road usage charge out of the 2021 plan. We've completed the modeling portion of that plan, and we're now working on the environmental document, which is quite extensive, and we plan on bringing that back to the board later this year. And we've started talking to communities and working groups about the 2025 plan update. We're already well into the cycle for the next plan. We're doing both of those right now consecutively. We're actively working on a lot of our priority projects, including the Otay Mesa port of entry. We're working with many federal and state agencies and partners together to try to deliver the state-of-the-art crossing for our binational region. The costs have gone up significantly since we first started looking at this project a couple of years ago. And we're looking for other additional funding to make sure that we can keep this project on schedule. When it's open, it's going to provide many of the benefits, not only to our region, but to the state and the nation in terms of goods being moved back and forth across the border. We're very pleased to announce that the CTC has allocated the first $152 million of the $300 million we received late last year for the Delmar Bluff stabilization project, and we're starting the environmental and design on that project as we speak. And we're doing everything we can to get funding to keep other low sand projects moving forward. Yeah. In recent events, we were proud to congratulate Chairwoman Vargas, who was awarded keys to the city of Tijuana last Friday. The Chairwoman is an excellent example of our thriving cross-border community, and we are proud to work with her and to improve our region on both sides of the border. In February, we received an exciting honor from the United Nations. They met here in our boardroom, and they've identified Sandag as a model for regional collaboration, and they want to share our work with the world. And so we have been asked to attend their General Assembly in Kenya in June. And this is actually an incredible opportunity for the San Diego region to be recognized as a major metropolitan area. We also have won a lot of other awards that I'm really proud of here at the agency. Our open data portal was selected for the 2023 Data and Insight Tyler Excellence Award for Public Sector. The San Diego Lagoon Restoration Project received an Environmental Business Journal Award. And the Delmar Bluffs Emergency Repair was awarded the American Society of Civil Engineers Region 9 Outstanding Geotechnical Engineering Project. Finally, the ITALC is seeking qualified members to fill 2 public vacancies that they have right now. If you know of anybody who would be a good fit for those, please direct them to the news section of our website. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Rick. Do we have any public member comments on the raise report?
We do not.
We do not. Any member comments? Sure.
Can I ask a question about the presentation yesterday, or am I allowed to ask a question about what you just said?
The presentation, oh, at
If you
the
can tie it in somehow, that'd be helpful.
well, it doesn't relate to those specific topics. I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong.
We do try to keep it to the topics that are discussed
Yeah,
during
okay.
that item, so that we aren't going outside the bounds of the Brown Act, but it's certainly.
Maybe we can figure out how to squeeze it in the board member. comments. Yeah, that's
And
right.
perhaps we could address it.
Yeah,
Okay. Now I'm wondering what it was.
Ability to discuss non-agenda items.
there's board member comments, item number 6, yeah. Which Ray. Okay, so, then number 3, update from the Office of Independent Performance Auditor activities. So Mary,
Thank you.
and welcome
We-
back.
Thank you. I enjoyed my time off somewhat. So I received the audit. It's finally completed. So it's quite a large number of pages, but we're gonna get through it and trying to condense it into a fact sheet as much as possible, because I know that's probably what people most will read is that fact sheet. I'm going through it right now, hopefully to get it reviewed by next Tuesday. We have a finalized meeting to discuss any changes that I'm going to propose to the team. We have an exit conference scheduled on the 16th next week. Ray finally accepted our invitation. Really appreciate that.
Not in charge of my own calendar, but okay.
So at that point, we'll be able to give it to management, also to a peer reviewer to look at it from another audit perspective to make sure we're aligned, and probably you as well, Chair. Get the input. We will give management till around April 12th to provide a response. And from there, it will come to the audit committee and the May meeting, and then hopefully to the board either in May or June, no later than June. So we're getting it along. Finally, I know that my team was exhausted from this audit. It was a hefty task, and I really want to praise them because they did a great job. The audit report is beautiful. It's a lot to read, but it's beautiful. And so I thank them for that. Moving forward, I'm working also on the quarterly report for fraud, waste, and abuse, and that will come as well in May for the quarterly report. We're closing some cases there too, which is a really good thing. And then I'm going to be moving into next week, starting to invite members of the board and the audit committee for our annual risk discussion. I had a lot of good conversation with a lot of the board members yesterday at the retreat. It went really well. I was quite impressed about the number of interest for new board members that came to our area and wanted to really have a deep discussion. So that was really great to see. It was nice to see that, and also that they were wanting to have that risk discussion. So I'll set up meetings with everyone and give them an opportunity to have that discussion, as well as risk discussions with management, which is typical. And from there, I'll begin our annual audit plan for next fiscal year. So when I leave, the good thing is we will have a full year's plan ahead of me. So the work can continue, even if I'm not here. So that's a good thing. I also want to toot my horn a little bit. The International Internal Audits Association reached out to me and invited me to come and speak at their global conference for governance, good governance, and they asked me if I would be their keynote speaker, and I've accepted that engagement. And as well as the Fraud Examiner Association, who's asked me in December to go to Washington, DC, and also do a 60-minute keynote speaker session on fraud risk and the organization of governance. So I'm excited about that. So that is a new kind of avenue that I hope to continue going down, is some teaching around auditing and governance. So I'm excited about that. That's it.
Thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank
Sounds
you.
like fun stuff.
Yeah.
Any public member comments?
No public comments.
Okay. Any board member comments? Questions? Stuart?
I guess, could you potentially elaborate a little bit on where you are vis-a-vis the discussions with management? You mentioned that the report is quite a big one and that the exit conference is coming up. Have you had any kind of sort of interim pre-exit discussions so that this won't be a surprise? They won't
Oh,
be seeing
yeah.
it for the first time.
It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
Okay.
I mean, I've had several discussions with Ray. I've had several discussions with Hassan, and we had a lot of interaction back and forth with Andre as we were requesting information and how we were getting it. So it should not be a shock to anybody.
Question, so, the management will give you their response by roughly mid-April,
We are expecting them to have a response to it by April. Yes.
April 12th, okay. And when do you think there will be a first draft of the report for other committee to,
So the actual report will come to the audit committee finalized with management's response at the May meeting. So typically, I ask for one member, and it's usually Bob, to help me with a peer review because of his auditing experience, to do a glance of it and a review of it. I do brief the members who, you have a briefing of it, so you'll get briefed on it before the meeting as well.
Okay. Thanks. I'll move on to item number 4, which is approval of meeting minutes. Francesca, do we have any public comments on the meeting minutes?
We do not.
Okay, do we have any board member comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Thank
Motion.
you. Motion by Monson, second by Halpern. Please call the vote, or we don't have clickers, right? So
We don't, no.
you
Board Member Chair Zito,
do, yes.
Vice Chair Drucker,
Abstain.
Public Member Bob Monson,
Monson, yes.
Public Member Adam Nickerson,
Nickerson, yes.
and Public Member Stuart Halper. Thank you, and that item does pass with 4 yeses and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Now we move on to item number 5, the main topic for today, which is a continued discussion on the independent performance auditor recruitment process. I think possibly, one of the actions that we had requested last time was for the subcommittee to perhaps put some more meat behind our recommendation of having the auditor position remain internal, simply because the executive committee was considering looking at the pros and cons of this again. So even though we've made a recommendation before, we didn't have much content. And so if you have, I don't know, if you have something to present or to discuss or review.
I can throw out what we put together.
Okay.
Stuart can jump in, anybody else can jump in, Mary.
Yeah, I have
And
stuff like
Mary supplied quite a bit of stuff. So I'm just gonna start off with benefits of sticking with an in-house as opposed to going outside, bring someone in. Probably the biggest thing that I think there is that you bring somebody, if you keep the in-house, you have structured an in-house group that has knowledge of this organization. So there isn't any learning curve, because that's what's going to happen if you bring an outside external firm come in. There's going to be a significant amount of learning, especially with the size of this organization, the complexity. But you already have that in-house. You also have certain skill sets that are brought in here, whether it be contracting, whether it be fraud, whether it be some of the other very specific things that Sandag's involved in. I think the other thing that I'm kind of rest upon is that this group or an in-house can build trust very easily. They've been able to build trust. They've been able to network with the agency. And you're not necessarily going to have that with an external firm. It's going to, again, take them some time to build that trust, as well as the network. And here you already have a group that does that. I want to talk a little bit about the cost issue, because that seems to be where people go. And from my experience as a chief audit executive, I did outsource some audits, but it wasn't because of the cost. It was based upon expertise and skill level within my own staff. And what I found is that in comparing what my staff was doing in other type of audits and looking at what those individual audits were costing in comparison to the firm that I was using to do certain other type of outsourcing. And at the port, the primary areas that when I was there that I focused in on, where I didn't have the skill level, was environmental and IT. And what I found is that the cost of those audits were almost twice as much as what my auditors were doing. So it may be that if the board decided to do bring in an external firm, that first year might be somewhat cost, but you're going to find it building throughout the years that you use it. I think one of the other negatives that you do have with that bringing in an external firm is how do you manage that contract? Here that the IP or the external firm will report to the committee, but there's a day-to-day operation that takes place. There's a day-to-day management of that contract and that firm. And I think that would be a challenge. I know that Alga, in their article, they, of course, their recommendation is that it be in-house. They gave very good reasons, some of which I've brought out already. But they said that if an organization decides to go outside, that organization should really have someone in-house as an independent auditor in conjunction with the audit committee to help manage that contract and those audits. Again, just my own opinion based on my own experience. I found that oftentimes it was hard for external firms to pivot if there was no necessity to change an audit. There was also the circumstances where we didn't always get the same people coming in to conduct those audits. And so again, you're back to the whole learning curve again. That's why I really do lean on the IPA should be an individual. That's going to be the best for the organization and for the board. And I'll just kind of leave it open to everybody else. That's what I have to say.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or input?
Well, I think I mentioned to you that because you and Bob were in some dialogue over this, I did not, for Brown Act purposes, I did not have additional conversations with Bob. But I guess I have one process question. Well, let me throw out another informational thing. This is a little late breaking, but so it didn't get into Bob's presentation of materials. So the local ALGO representative also referred me to California Government Code 36.525, which I'm sure Amber Lynn can probably recite for us if we want to go through that. But basically, it specifies that information collected in an audit is only protected by law if it's an in-house auditor. And so if an outside firm is used, there might be, professional ethical obligations to keep material confidential. There might be contractual obligation to keep material confidential, but would not actually be protected by law as it is per California code for use of an in-house auditor. And so, probably individuals in an organization wouldn't be aware of that necessarily, but to the extent that people are aware of that, that could actually have a chilling effect on the collection of information. And the information extends to notes, all communications, things of that nature. So,
Yeah, really?
And if I could, in the 30 seconds that I had to research this, I did flip the code. It is applicable to city auditors. So that would be auditors that are employed by cities, which would not be found out. I can do some additional research on that, but I just wanted to put that information out there as far as the scope of that particular section.
Okay, well, then it probably should
There
be.
are more codes at the state level that refer to government auditors, period, in general. So I can look those up.
So then the process question though, Bob was very eloquent in presenting quite a number of perspectives, as well as his personal perspective. I'm curious, process wise, the executive committee is supposed to revisit this. at their
Next
next
Friday,
meeting.
I
Okay.
believe.
We have Bob to go and present, or I know, no disrespect to you, but is that permissible or?
I would assume it's permissible, at least as a public member. I don't know if you could present it in the same way that I could, but I also think I could probably do a decent job of presenting that material myself as well, so. But it's up to.
Well, I guess I would suggest that, at a minimum, you two guys spend some time to make.
Well, we
sure
need to
that-
get, I mean, my preference would be to get it actually written down so it can be shared with the committee prior to the meeting.
Right, and then the only shortfall is when there's Q and A.
Yeah.
You, again, with all respect, you're at a severe disadvantage informationally relative to, Bob's personal experience.
Well, and I intend to be present through at least a Zoom that can answer any audit related questions from an audit perspective.
Yeah, but
Just a comment on that, and I don't mind doing that, I don't mind being there.
Right.
But as the chair of the audit committee, I think it carries a lot more weight. Seeing, and it just.
yeah, I appreciate the offer and I'll contemplate it, but yeah, I agree. I think
Yeah.
particularly if I have the
Yeah.
backup of the IPA with me there, that the two of us can probably do a really good job of representing it. I just want to get
That
something
I'm trying to get out of it.
Yes, you can. written down, and we can also reference, where the comments come from as well. That it's not just in your case that Ms. Warren Nickerson or
Yeah, I do
Stuart
have,
have other comments that should be put into the record. We should get those incorporated too.
I do have a couple comments too. I think either, Bob can be there to answer a question on Mary, will be helpful too. That's my perspective, because they really have very in-depth knowledge and done a lot of research about this topic. Not that, won't be able to learn about it, they already have all the information, so why not bring them along? From my perspective, this is really a question about, are we trying to do a function that is an ongoing function, right? The internal or independent performance audit is an ongoing function. It's not a one-time special things. So then the question is, what's the benefit of outsourcing a ongoing function versus, doing it in-house? To me, their benefit of to outsource something if they can do it better, cheaper. I'm not sure in this case that's really true. I know for sure it's not going to be cheaper, right? When you use an outside firm, the rate is pretty high, and I don't think it'll be cheaper. Is it better? I really do question. I agree. I've seen, internal audit function sometimes use an outside firm on very specialty item like IT that they may not have an expert or construction or some very specific things. To me, the internal audit function here should be a continuous, audit and reviewing internal controls and process. Having a team that actually knows the institution, have the institution knowledge, know who are the right people to talk to, what are the issues, the strengths and weaknesses of the institution, I think it goes a long way. So I do question, why would the outside to be able to do it better? So that's my perspective.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so I do have some stuff to share. So when I initially put in my notice to retire and I was preparing the short report, I pulled information straight out of AB 805. That's what I go by, the law. More than policy or anything, I always follow the law first because it is the authority. Upon doing that, the general counsel's office revised that to add in the language from board policy 39. And my assumption was that that policy was accurate and it reflected the law. However, it does not. It's concerning that we delayed this now 3 solid months to do a recruitment that should have already been ongoing and probably getting wrapped up had we followed AB 805, the law versus Board Policy 39. The law clearly states, for good reason, and I'll share those reasons with you, that NIPA, not NIPA or outsourced firm, but NIPA would be appointed, not by the board, by the audit committee, with the approval of the board. So Board Policy 39 clearly isn't been interpreted wrong, because it clearly states that the audit committee, not the board, appoints the IPA, not the IPA or an outsource. And it clearly states that the board approves that. That is not what Board Policy 39 states. Now, for good reason, I can see why it wouldn't state such a thing. For years, they had one internal auditor who reported to management, was not independent, who received raises from management and whose plan was approved by management. And obviously it was broken. The system wasn't working. Obviously there were concerns, and that's how AB 805 came about. That's how my position came about. You can go back and look for 25 years at the audit reports from an external auditor. There were no findings. There were rarely any findings. So now we're all of a sudden, through a misinterpreted board policy, looking to undo really what AB 805 has stated we are to do, which is hire an independent auditor full-time with staff. And in fact, it states in AB 805, the only one that can contract or hire audit staff is the IPA. It doesn't state anything else. And so this interpretation is concerning for me, that we're even considering, or that the board, knowing the risk of this agency, both in the past and still that exists, knowing would even consider, even if it was an option, would consider an external firm to do this, when we know that external auditors haven't had the findings that an internal staff that is full force involved with daily activity of SANDAC, working together with management and having the findings that we've had. This is a continuing issue. All of our audits are around policy issues, lack of training issues, and really severe lack of control issues. That is not what outside firms focus on. If you look at any outside audit, they always pull their opinion away from internal controls. They in fact say, we do not rely on internal controls, nor do we opine on internal controls. The purpose of an internal audit office is to focus on operational systems and controls. That is not what an external firm does. So I just want it to be noted. I think that moving forward, the discussion should really be about, we misinterpreted what AB 805 specifically states in Board Policy 39. And our focus needs to be on, okay, we approve and accept the recommendation of what the audit committee said in January, and let's get the ball rolling for this recruitment so we can get an IPA in here that will continue the work that I have worked my tail off to do here at this agency, and let my staff continue doing their work. That's all I have to say.
Okay, well, I will also, and I appreciate the comments, appreciate the perspective. I mean, we all appreciate the work that's been put in and the effort that's been had. And I think, you know, if you watched the meeting last time, that expression of appreciation was extended to your whole team as well. And I think we all realize the value of their team. I also, just as per the last meeting, you know, acknowledge that my nature is to give people the benefit of the doubt initially. And what we have right now is an entirely new board leadership, brand new, all this year. And while we may like to think that they would just immediately understand that this is a important function that we should just take their advice without questioning. I also have lived through enough personal changes of leadership at executive levels in my life to understand that's never how it works. Whenever we have new leadership come in, they feel like they're there for a reason, and that they do get the ability to question things. So I personally find it unfortunate that it's delayed the process, but I also haven't internally necessarily viewed anything malicious about it or intentionally devious about it, just from a function of I think that they feel like they have a job to do, that they have their own experience and they think they want to look into it. From, given that experience. I don't know if anybody else has any comments.
But I believe it should be within the guidelines of what the law actually says.
Right, and the leadership is going to go by the law, which is going to give you the interpretations by the attorneys that they have available to them, is what I expect is what I would be doing as a leadership on a board position normally is be following the expert advice of the staff that I've hired. So I don't know, Amberlynn, if you wanted to jump in.
I do, I would just offer to the committee, at, utilities code, public utilities code section 132354.1, which is where the changes that were implemented in AB 805 are incorporated. It does state that, you know, the committee shall appoint an independent performance auditor subject to the approval of the board. It does not require that that person or that function be filled by an employee of the agency, nor does it preclude utilizing a consultant to fill that function. Board policy 39 specifically references that allowance where it says that the board may choose to fill that function utilizing an individual or a firm. So in my opinion, those two work together and they are consistent with each other.
Just for a point of information, does AB 805, when it says the language says that the audit committee shall appoint an IPA, does that specify
It's
the
the,
option to
no,
be an outside firm?
in fact, it says,
Well, let me know.
And it doesn't state either way. It doesn't say that she must be an employee, nor does it preclude it from being an outside consultant
Okay.
or some variation thereof,
Okay.
which is.
actually, I can quote
No,
it.
no, well, because I heard you say that it was expressly permitted by AB 805.
No,
It's in
yeah,
policy 39.
section 13, section 132351.4 of the Public Utilities Code is amended to read, and then it goes down to 5B5, which states the audit committee shall consist of 5 voting members with 2 board members and 3 members of the public appointed by the board. The audit committee shall recommend to the board the contract of a firm conducting an annual financial audit and the hiring of an independent performance auditor approve the audit plan after discussion with the independent performance auditor pursuant to subdivision section 1325.1.4. It then says section 15, 132354.1 public utilities states B1, the audit committee shall appoint an independent performance auditor subject to approval by the board, who may only be removed for cause by a vote of 2/3 of the audit committee and the board. It then goes down to talk about B3, the auditor, the IPA, shall have the power to appoint, employ, and remove assist employees, personnel as deemed necessary for the efficient and effective administration of the affairs of the office and to prescribe their duty, scope, and authority of qualifications. So this is coming straight from the public utilities, and it states nothing about hiring an outside firm, and it does specifically state an IPA.
So what I heard, just, and happy to hear other opinions, is that then board policy 39's reference to an outside firm was an interpretation of that language. It was not expressly permitted in the language, it was an interpretation of that language. Is that fair?
Well, it's not expressly excluded or permitted. It is an option for the board to consider, and that's acknowledged.
Which
in
is an
policy
interpretation.
39.
That's an interpretation.
But it is consistent with the statute.
Is it an interpretation?
established.
or not?
No, it is consistent with law as an allowable act that the board could
No,
take.
that's not what the law says.
But that's actually not what the law said.
No, it's not.
Well, I do not read this code section interpreting with AB 805 as requiring it to be an individual. It is a
An
function.
independent.
No, I'm just trying to clarify that this is your interpretation.
Well, it was the board's interpretation when it adopted board policy 39. And
No.
my.
Board
interpretation
policy
is
39
consistent
was
with
drafted by John and myself for the audit charter part of it, and John for that part of it. But it clearly states an independent auditor. That's singular. That's one person.
And again, an independent auditor could be a non-employee.
No,
of the
I get that, but
agency, it could be
I'm
an
just trying
employee
to
of a
point
firm.
out is that that's an interpretation.
Not one that I would agree with, but we can have the debate nonetheless.
Okay, so this seems to be subject to debate. But the audit committee did meet, we even consider, talk about a potential having an outside independent firm versus an internal one, and the audit committee did make a recommendation to the board to continue to have an internal function, right? So now the board has this recommendation, either they can approve or reject it, right? Rather than because then they come back to the audit committee and say, well, the board rejected the internal function and therefore we need to.
Well, I'm hoping that's not the end
I hope
result,
not too.
but I don't know. Again, that to me actually be an interpretation. I think the language is the audit committee recommends an independent performance auditor, not a class of independent performance auditors, and that's what gets accepted or rejected. Remember, you can decide whether or not that would fit within the language, but that's effectively what you could say is going on right now, which is we're making a recommendation on a class subject to board approval. And there is clearly a divergence of opinions between our attorney and our IPA as to whether or not that's even possible under the code. All I can say is from my personal experience is that the worst case scenario would be, as Board Member Halper said, it's an interpretation, which our attorney doesn't agree with, but I would say the challenge is, that it is an interpretation. I have no idea if we took this to trial with the jury, which way the jury would go, right?
If I could, so two thoughts. First,
Yeah.
I think there's a legitimate question as to whether board policy 39, that feature of board policy 39 is in fact consistent with the law. That's a separate consideration from the merits of internal versus external. And perhaps we can deal with them separately. It would be for the executive committee and the board, potentially, if they thought the merits of an external firm outweigh all the things that Bob and everything,
Right.
then they could take that risk that it would be deemed illegal. They could decide to take that risk. And Sandag's counsel could say, we do not believe there's a risk. But in theory, there still is some risk, and perhaps you could consider presenting that as part of the presentation. There is a process by which that can get resolved. We could seek an attorney general opinion on that, which would take longer than the recruitment process. So I'm not saying that we do that as part of this particular process, but there is an ongoing question, which probably is in the interest of the organization to get answered. So it might be a reasonable thing to actually, seek an attorney general opinion on that question, because it may come up for the next auditor after Mary's replacement, whether that's internal or external.
So actually, I do think that's a good approach, really, with two things to tackle, right?
They're
One is,
really quite separate.
yeah, one is the more immediate one, right? Do we have enough information to go to the executive committee meeting and the board to present the case why this audit committee recommend to retain the current structure among this outside firm? I know Bob has done a lot of work already. Do you feel that we have enough information, or do we need to do something extra, like have Bob summarize the information because it's too much, or?
Well, that's what I had asked for before, and I think he gave a pretty good summary, but I do need to get it written down in a way that I can share it with the executive committee, as well as I would be interested in opinion. I mean, Bob, you shared the one paper with me that Mary Kay also shared.
Well, I was gonna say the
And-
entire board received all that information
Right.
and a summary,
Yeah,
so.
so they've received that at this point
Yeah.
through Mary Kay, but I did want specifically in this case, the recommendation of the public members of this particular body to have with that backup. So that's why, because it's one thing just to have it come through the staff channels. But so I think the next step would just be to take your comments and get them written down so I can include it with the material that Mary Kay has already sent out.
I think it's also very important that we bring and I'm sure Hassan will be there, that Hassan continues to support an internal IPA. Which I think it says a lot,
Yeah.
it says a lot.
I have a thing to add, just thoughts. as AB 805 is written and the policy, the Sandag policy is written, basically, if we were to hire a firm instead, they would have the authority as AB 805 is written, is to appoint, employ, remove, assist employees and personnel as deemed necessary. So that is written in AB 805.
Right.
So if a firm were hired, that we would be affected by that. So that's just something to be clear, I guess, to share and just.
Yeah, I think my staff just continues to have concerns.
Yeah.
You know, that this is a public discussion and they have jobs, you know, that they're worried about. I am not concerned. I hope the board does the right thing and they have nothing absolutely to worry about. As I said, I don't believe AB 805 gives that option. I believe
Right.
it's a very singular and independent auditor. It's not a firm or an independent auditor. And so I think it's very clear. And I think the Attorney General is a good avenue for us to seek further legal advice, which also opens up that I think in the future, we really need to bring in the discussion about an independent counsel, just as the city of San Diego has, to represent audit matters.
I think we've
Well,
talked about, well, I think we've talked about, oh, David, you want to say something? No, I think we've talked about potentially, having a conversation on that on the April meeting as just a discussion topic.
which.
Now,
one is
I
that?
actually moved that to the June. I thought we discussed it. I moved it to June. Did you want me to?
Oh, no, June's fine too. I
Okay.
just thinking that I didn't want to combine with this discussion directly.
That's what I thought. but
Yeah, right. Okay, June, we're fine then too, yeah, for that. So I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add, Stuart or David?
Well, I'm not sure I'm gonna be here in June, but,
We
that's
still have to
what-
address that.
separate matter.
Separate, that's another discussion actually, but
Yes, I would like to, talk about that, but I didn't hear comments.
So if I hear correctly, most people on this committee believe that it should be an internal employee.
It was, you said, what you hear was a unanimous vote by the recommendation of this committee, including your predecessor, that it should be an internal function, yes.
The question then is how to persuade the executive committee that that is the right result.
Which was what?
Bob's only gone half the way there, unfortunately. And I really think you need to list, here are the criteria that we judge.
Mhm.
Here are the answers to those criteria. There's one other missing piece that I think we want to talk about, which is, okay, what are sister agencies doing? Like the port, like, maybe this, I don't know, the city of San Diego. I know NCTD has a independent auditor that's an employee. What does MTS do?
They have the same.
Yeah.
I work there.
Yeah, so
we've done that, yeah.
Yeah, we've done that, and actually that was specifically asked for by the executive.
Yeah, again. So those,
Yes,
the executive committee needs to have a very, it's not a, what I would consider a verbal summary as much as here's the criteria. This is where an internal auditor meets it, and this is how an external auditor meets it. And so that they can see back very clearly, so that they can feel comfortable when they make the decision, that they're making the right decision, because as you know, Dave, they are all mostly new. The vice chair and chair have only been there on Sandag for 2 years.
the chair's
Yeah, they're
only
running
been on the
it.
board for 2 months.
Well,
She was on the transportation committee, she was not on the board.
Well, she's on the transportation, so she's been involved in Sandag for
Okay.
2 years. So let's not nitpick on this point. Well, let's assume that they've all, the only person, well, a couple people on the executive committees have been around for a little bit more. Lisa being one
Oh,
of those.
yes,
So,
a lot more.
yeah, so, but again, we need to bring them along. We need to treat them as if they're going to make a good decision. And, the more structured we make our decision, rather than just verbal,
Well, and then I think if you listened, I said we need to go with Bob said written down and instead of points
Yeah.
of why. So just so you're clear, in the last meeting, what I had specifically directed, Bob had mentioned, as well as the other members, that there were actual articles written by auditing organizations as to why this is better. And wait, let me finish. And what I had asked for was a summary of how that applies to Sandbag, which is what I think he was verbalizing. We just need to get it written down.
Right, again, I would strongly suggest you come up with, here's a criteria.
Yeah.
This is external, this is internal, how they're met.
Right.
I would not get into discussion about the legal at this point, which Stuart has chatted about, and just leave that off the table for right now. The question is, can we persuade the executive committee to follow our recommendation? And the more organized it is, the more cut and dry it is, the better off we're gonna be.
So that information was actually documented in writing and provided to them. And I will share that I had a really good conversation with Nora on Tuesday about the 8805 and about our perspective, a little bit more in depth about the agency and the risks that I've seen and that perspective. And I think she was very open to that conversation. She was enlightened, I think, by a lot of information that was shared with her. And so I'm hopeful that that will help and bring it along as well. I guess I'm a little just disappointed that we had to lose 3 months as a result of this. So.
And if I can say, I agree with Dave. I think what's missing is.
You're gonna have to be careful with
Sorry, Dave.
that.
What's missing is, it's great that we forwarded the algo reports and all this other stuff. This is something that could be a one-page chart, right? It's like a matrix where you have in-house, outhouse, outside, and then you have outsource. No pun intended. And then the criteria, and you have like a plus and a minus in the boxes. And that's a fairly simple presentation. I would, however, differ on the point about legal. Because I think there's a non-zero legal risk here. It may be judged to be a de minimis risk by council, but then again, the council are the ones who drafted board policy 39. And so we've got, Mary, who's had 30+ years of doing this.
Auditing criteria, auditing law.
I think it's a non-zero risk. And if I were a board member, I would want to know what the risks are.
So the criteria is risk, right? And with an internal auditor, there is zero risk of following the law. With an outside auditor, it's not plus, it's not negative, it's just, it is not 100% known right now. That's all.
That's fair. I would think that should be part of the presentation.
Exactly.
Because board members don't want to do things that subject them to.
Well, except for I would disagree with one part of David's statement, which is nothing we do involves zero risk. Sorry. So you're talking about
It shouldn't
some
be
amount of risk.
presented, it shouldn't be presented as if there's zero.
No, I'm just saying, even if we follow the recommendation, there's not zero risk. We all know that being an agency, they get sued all the time.
Well, yeah, anybody can sue anybody on
Yes.
any day, and any superior court
Yes.
judge, and any day can
Yes.
make any
But
decision.
I can personally, from my profession of 27 years, list several risks of having an outside versus an inside. And those documents that were provided to the board clearly identifies those risks as well.
Again, I think we need a one-page summary.
I can
So,
do a
yeah.
one-page summary in 2 hours and have it for everybody, so.
Ed, you have a comment?
I just want to offer something. It's probably not appropriate in that discussion with the executives, but has to be considered, and that's the optics. Sanday went along. I mean, we know what happened with the previous CEO, which led to some legislation, and here we are today. And so it's only been very recent past that we've had an auditor's report that called into question some of the habits, spending habits. And so now we have an auditor who revealed that is leaving. And now we're going to change, in the middle of the ocean, we're going to go a different way. And that is going to be spelled out in the most negative light in the media. And we were at that executive committee meeting, and the question that was asked about options, I think was well intentioned. I don't know that it was firmly based in the knowledge, but it was simply a question that was asked, and the chair said, yeah, let's look into it. Let's give some more information. I think were the exact words. But we're going to be crucified as an organization. I'm not speaking as a politician. I'm speaking about an organization. So my challenge then to that decision, if we go externally, there are going to be a very good reason as to why the justifications have to cover every one of those bases with a compelling argument as to why. Because of this, we're doing that. Because of that, we're doing this. Otherwise, we're going to lose exponentially more credibility than we've lost in the last 2 years as an organization.
No, and
We all-
I believe that people are well aware of that.
Yep. I don't want to, I
don't
love
know
this
how many-
organization, this retreat we
Yeah,
had,
second.
told me a lot of good things about this organization.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to go down a path that causes our credibility to call into question. Just my friends.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I just, going back to Mr. Kruger's point, I'm not sure that's an argument that sways the executive committee
Yeah.
as opposed to.
And that's why I say it's not even part of an argument, but
Yeah.
it has to be in the back of their mind.
And it is, I guarantee you it is. It's already been brought up.
Yeah, I would like to know one pro of going external. I'm
We may find-
frankly.
So that would have. to
Yeah,
be
I'd
an
like to
argument
know
for it.
one pro. That would be a great challenge for me to hear one pro.
Okay, in the context of the discussion, I guess I should start out this way. Francesca, do we have any public comment?
We do not have any public comment.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
I just want to take public comment.
I certainly don't know the internals of this. I can tell you what I've read over the time. I've been here 15 years. I would just ask that the audit committee, whatever recommendations you provide, address some of the things that I'm aware of or may or may not be true of illegalities, if I could put it that way, that have in this context put black eyes on this organization to provide legal, administrative, operational, optic, so that won't happen again. And if the things of the past provide some color for that in terms of deciding, then I think those are worth putting in at some point, because it really, from a public point of view, when you're mitigating the road usage charge because of something I understand 10 years ago didn't happen right, going back like that really throws a wrench in this sense. And I hope that comment is appropriate here.
Good, thank
And
you.
I'll fill out a card.
I'm assuming that's our only public comment. Okay, thank you, Francesca. So with that, then trying to summarize, so I know, Mary, you're just much more wanting to jump into that report more, but are you willing to spend the 2 hours to come up with that checklist and run it by Bob?
Yep.
And then, I mean, I think in order to avoid Brown Act issues, unfortunately, I think what we can do is run it by Bob and then share it with me, and we can finish it up and then work on it. And we can share it with the rest of the members, but we shouldn't be having them actually work on it with us, discuss it with us, just saying this is what we've come up with. You guys can see it, but it'll basically be Bob, myself, and Mary Kay on actually putting it together and then getting it to the executive committee before hopefully Tuesday or Wednesday. That would work for everyone. Okay, on that checklist. So it's a good idea. Thanks for throwing that in there, and we'll try to get it done because I think we have a compelling argument. I think we should win. So.
And
Sure.
could we perhaps schedule for another time the question of the board policy 39 and trying to potentially pursue, as Mary suggested, the attorney general weigh in?
Sure. I guess it's, in some regards, I would just suggest, the question I would ask is how much we would want to pursue something which is likely an exercising futility, because you're at that point really kind of going down asking a political question as opposed to a legal question, because at the end of the day, the answer that's going to be given to us by the state is going to be directed by the people at the state level who are aligned with the people that are currently running Sandex board. But I'm happy to talk about it further going on. I'm just not that hopeful for it coming out with a different answer.
Well, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that because I'm presuming.
Yes,
What
right.
the answer would be.
Right,
I'm just saying that it strikes me that there's a legitimate question that
and what
the
I do think,
agency would want
what
to
I-
have answered.
what I do think we should do is, I mean, we can either separately or in conjunction with this, I would advise separately, maybe after the process is over, saying, hey, you know, we've noticed, and particularly to Crystal's point, some inconsistencies around board policy 39 about how it would be implemented. If you could go to an external firm, and we might want to try to address that and clean that up. And at the same time, maybe look at this question and see if this should even be possible, but because those inconsistencies very clearly do exist around the point you made, who exactly is the IPA hiring?
Yeah,
If it's an external firm,
no,
right?
I agree, but
And
because, you know, I would hope, and something that you said was a little concerning, and I know
Yeah.
you are being completely honest because that's who you are. But it's very concerning that the Attorney General over a political agenda would not do his job and ethics as required under his own ethical standards
right,
to interpret law based on actual facts and what the law states versus what the political opinion might be. So I would hope, I don't care what party you're with, like me, I'm very apolitical, and I would hope the Attorney General would be apolitical and do their job. And that is to interpret the law as it should be interpreted without bias.
oh, and I concur with you, and the point that is, again. Knowing that I respect you tremendously and your opinions and intellect tremendously. I also respect our attorney tremendously. That tells me there's some ambiguity here. There's ambiguity in the law. What do? You go back and look at how that sausage was made. You go back and talk to Lorena and who else ever made this law, I can tell you, they're gonna probably say, oh, it looks like it's working great. We don't need to change anything. That's my guess, but I think it's still, it might be a worthwhile exercise, but I'm just putting that.
Well, I can promise you, because I've been around for
Yeah.
27 years,
Yeah.
that the audit aspect of any law and
Yeah.
any statute is to get it passed.
Yeah,
Because the public loves auditors and loves to know that their dollars are being audited. So anyone, their only intention in most cases to get anything regarding a auditor put into law or statute is to simply get it passed.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think there was a whole lot of focus on that aspect of
yeah.
it.
No, That's, yeah, I think that's to the same point then. Okay, so
Yes,
Agnes or Miss Wong Nickerson, I know you had another topic.
yes, in relation to the same
Related to
item,
this, Yes,
right? Because this is really the focus is on the recruitment recommendation.
yes,
And that involves the process. You know, I think this committee actually, you know, when we met, I don't even remember which meeting before, right? We talked about, we got Stuart and Bob. Volunteered or voluntold to take on the recruiting, you know, process.
they didn't step back as fast as you did.
Find them. So at the time, we didn't really expect to have this delay, right? That we thought we would go to the executive committee and presented the recommendations, so Bob and Stuart can move forward and work on the recruiting. So right now, I think it sounds like we will have at least 3 months delay in this process, and there's just not enough time for Bob and Stuart to finish what they have been asked to start. And they're really, you know, they have all experience, they've been with this committee for quite some time. They're really the best person to really help with that recruiting process to make sure we get the best, you know, next IPA. So my recommendation is to go to the executive committee to ask them at minimum, extend Bob and Stuart's membership on this committee for 3 more months. Now, I'm also hoping that the committee will take to the board with, I think it's some recommendation to relook at the terms of the public member, audit committee, you know, the term.
Yeah, but that only apply to future members, not
Right.
current members.
Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, so I think that is more important that, you know, I would like to see their membership get extended so they can finish this recruiting process. Because I think it will be very challenging to have 2 brand new members to try to pick it up for me or someone else, right, to try this. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, we can discuss. I guess first I'll ask a question. I mean, I know, for example, that we're able to appoint committee member Musgrove because the board voted to grant a waiver for the requirement of a
6 years, is it?
of 3 years board service. And so I mean, could they do something like that? Say, could they grant a waiver on the term limitation? So these two could serve an extra 3 months or something if we went with such a
It's
recommendation?
something that the board could consider doing. They could consider waiving the requirements in board policy 39 that sets those limits
Right.
for a limited purpose.
Right,
However, the item that has been agendized for today is very specific around the ICA recruitment. And what we're talking about is an amendment or a waiver of board policy. But do you think that we might be outside of what the Brown Act allows for making a formal recommendation or taking action on that item? We do, because we do have to.
that doesn't stop me from bringing it up with the executive. committee.
Exactly, it would, but my suggestion is if the audit committee did want to take a formal action and make that request, that we could agendize that for your next meeting appropriately and set that up as a.
We've seen how effective our formal recommendations are.
Well,
I think we did it for the intention of extension of not so much the participation in the audit committee as much as the recruitment around them being part of the recruitment of the IPA. How could that then not be discussed right now?
Well, because what you're asking for is a waiver of a requirement in board policy 39, and that would have to go to the board to waive their requirement.
Oh, I know eventually we have to go to the board, but why can't it be something that we ask of right now? Because
Well, I
the
guess
discussion is for
In the
it.
context of, I guess in the context of what Mary Kay's saying is, could we take an action today saying that we would like to recommend to the executive committee that a mechanism be found that allows Bob and Stuart to continue the recruitment process? Would that be appropriate?
And what I'm trying to address here is that there's a certain amount of risk that we're acting outside of the Brown Act
Right.
because of the way in which this particular action has been agendized. And so I'll read from you the government code section from the Brown Act that discusses this, and it requires that there's a brief general description of each item of business to be transacted or discussed. And as you'll note from today's description, it's not referencing any sort of waiver of board policy or a change to board policy. So, I would flag that as a risk for the committee that we're acting.
Well,
Pushing the limits of what the Brown Act
I'm
allows. for this
taking
item.
that risk as long as you don't mention board policy 39, but I'm willing to hear other people's.
And Berlin, is it the subtle difference between recruitment and recruiters?
Yeah, I was gonna say that another solution is we can turn them off. And then you can engage the firm of BS. BS.
I like the name.
To do the recruitment.
So I see that we're supposed to be discussing independent performance audit recruitment. Audit committee is asked to discuss an independent performance audit recruitment recommendation. And part of that recommendation is that we want to have Bob and Stuart be part of that
Yeah, so-
solution.
And I hear council's advice saying that there is some elevated risk, but I think it is as chair, as well as the members, to decide whether we're willing to take that risk. In this case, as long as we don't specifically mention board policy 39, I think I'm willing to take that risk, just saying, if somebody thinks that they would like to make a motion saying we would like to recommend to the executive committee that we work a way such that board member Monson or committee member Monson and helper, and we can continue along with the recruiting process till the end of the recruitment, or at least until July, whatever that, July of 2023. I'm comfortable with such a motion myself, if that seems to meet the need.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Second. Call for the vote.
For board members, Chair Zito,
Zito, yes.
Vice Chair Drucker,
Drucker, yes.
public members Bob Monson,
Munson, yes.
Agnes Wong Nickerson,
Nickerson, yes.
and Stuart Halpern.
Bob chose not to abstain and vote yes. I guess I'm more committed to vote yes.
Then that motion does pass unanimously.
Thank you.
Unanimously.
So So thanks for the healthy debate discussion. Any last comments before we move on to the next one, which is just member comments, but we probably shouldn't be talking about this one again. So I don't know if there are any other general board member comments that, or committee member comments that we'd like to raise.
I just want, I would just like to say that I think it is important that in June, we do bring back the discussion around board policy, changes around board policy 39. Because the time served is also not noted in AB 805. That's something that we also brought into through our own interpretation into board policy 39. So I think it's worth discussing that further at the time. So June,
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay.
Any member comments? Otherwise,
Stuart, you had a question?
I think I can hold it.
okay, we wore them out. All right, so that brings us to the end of the regular agenda. The next meeting is upcoming. We have upcoming meetings. The next audit committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, April 14th, 2023 at 12:30 p.m. Make sure you get your taxes done before then, because I'm assuming that will be a long one and you might not get it done. It is.
I got the storm.
I heard it.